of the groups and to hear the conversation. There were really a lot of great ideas being shared. And so what I would like to do is to start to the point where we can start hearing it. And what we'll be doing is recording your ideas as well so that we have them all there and make sure that everyone's ideas have been marked down. So I want to thank all of you for being here. During the election in Toronto, Danforth, climate change and the environment was one of the top issues that was raised time and time again. And it was really something that was this groundswell of people who really wanted to see something happen. And as the minister spoke, the time is now. So I really appreciate that all of you have taken the time out today as well to give us your ideas and your input, because that's how we get to where we need to be. So we are going to have a countdown clock because I don't have a natural 60-second timer in my mind. And Greg over here is going to be going with a microphone from group to group, and if the leader for each group can then stand up and give some comments about what was in your group for the 60 seconds. I did also want to acknowledge that the MPP for this area and the Minister for Climate Change and Environment for Ontario is here, Glen Murray. So he will also be listening to your thoughts as we go through this. So without further ado, Greg is over there, so maybe you can point yourself to a group right there. Is there a show of hands? People can put up their hands if they're the speaker for the group. All right.
Our group talked about, oh no, I lost it, okay. Massive public, or federal investment in public transit, especially in major cities like Toronto. No clapping, there's a timer. And we talked about how admitting that the science tells us that in order to meet not even a 1.5 degree target, but a 2 degree target, that most 85% of fossil fuels currently owned by fossil fuel companies need to stay in the ground. We also talked about how that is not under federal jurisdiction. And so what is under federal jurisdiction is the approval of pipelines like Kinder Morgan and Energy East, which would allow for the expansion of the tar sands. So we talked about how we're not sure, but a good sign that this federal government is actually serious about meeting a 1.5 or 2 degree target would be, the first sign would be to not approve, to reverse the National Energy Board approval of Kinder Morgan. And declarations on the rights of Indigenous people, first and foremost, which includes the right to say no and to veto resource extraction projects on their land.
Thank you. So next one, Greg, I see a hand right near you, I think.
We got one over here.
Hi, so my group talked about a lot of things. We talked about the importance of addressing, divesting from fossil fuel infrastructure, of not investing in pipelines, and instead taking that money and putting it into clean and renewable sources of energy. We talked about, as well, respecting Indigenous people's rights. We talked about infrastructure and how infrastructure will be with us for a long time. And so if we invest in fossil fuel infrastructure now, that's what we're going to be stuck with. And I think that a lot of the stuff that my group said about fossil fuels, about respecting Indigenous people, about transitioning to renewables really resonated with me as a young person, because I'm going to be the one who lives with this in the future. And I'm the one who grew up with this as something that has haunted my childhood. So I really feel really strongly that we need to take big steps towards renewable energy and a just transition to renewable energy now. Thank you.
Okay, from our group, a strong affirmation of 1.5 degrees, not 2 degrees, because that still is too dangerous. We still could have runaway climate change. Strong affirmation for the UN Declaration, and that's linked to contesting what Minister McKenna said about being proud to have negotiated the market tax. Because if we continue with international carbon markets as they function, leading to fraud, to violation of Indigenous rights, to stealing Native people's lands, then we are doing a grave injustice. Okay. We agree about keeping 80% of fossil fuels in the ground. The hashtag 80%. 80% of fossil fuels in the ground. And we're very concerned about the investor-state dispute settlement mechanisms under agreements like the Trans-Pacific Partnerships.
Hi, our group of 12 felt that we had to use the economy to force people to start acting smarter, everything from community retrofits and using railways instead of cars. We have to protect nature's benefits. Nature's already providing as much economic benefit as the whole rest of the the black line economy. So we talked about lowering expectations. We have to have smaller houses, I think. We need to have we need growth, but in sensible areas, like in health and the economy, not in oil and gas. So we talked about how the economy would drive a lot of little changes, like ride sharing, community retrofits, local renewables. So it would get us changing a whole realm of habits that we can't just carry on with.
Hi. Well, a lot of questions from our group. My main concern was why is there a contradiction in the government's action of expansion of the tar sands and what it says, which is the goal of reducing the emissions of the fossil fuels. There's a contradiction. We need an answer to that. A lot of our people in our group talked about the need for renewables by 2050 and a transition for workers to renewables. But we need mainly an answer to that question, which the government seems to be having, what should I say, a forked tongue, because they go one way, they say one thing, and they do another.
Our group also talked a lot about contradictions. We started off talking about the contradiction between saying we're listening to Indigenous communities but not acting upon what they're saying. So that was the first contradiction we talked about. We need to be able to have the right to say no. We also talked about the contradiction between advocating for a 1.5 degree target and then allowing the tar sands to continue. So we want to keep the tar sands and fossil fuels in the ground. We talked a lot also about some things we thought were positive. The public housing infrastructure was a very good thing among our group members. We want to see higher building codes and other building things in the area. We are also very concerned about the money that's going to highways and driving. The drivers need to stop being prioritized, and that money needs to be filtered to cycling and public transport infrastructure. members suggested we plant more trees.
Our group also noted a lot of the contradictions in the main. Initially, concern was, how do you plan on meeting the 40 to 45% emissions reduction target that you committed to? We haven't heard any ideas that the feds have. So that was something that was going around our group a lot. And in his election, towards being voted in, he had supported the tar sands pipelines, and yet we need to reduce the greenhouse gas emissions. So we're wondering, how's this going to work? So we had some practical solutions being tossed around, one of them being to offer incentives to corporations to localize employees and reduce their transit distance. So offer incentives for home offices, by example. Also revitalize the railways and LRTs in support of alternative, clean and renewable fuel source forms of transport. One of the ideas was tandem bikes, proper safe bike lanes, and electric cars and taxis. And also grow food locally, and part of that would require education on native plants introductions, especially edibles, and rebuild the tree canopy. I live in the High Park area. I've watched huge trees being chopped down every year, and just bringing in one tree to replace the tree that's cut down is not enough. And also to ban chemical and pesticide use for those perfect green lawns that people still think is a...
Thank you.
The Indigenous are truly a part of this and need to be included as active participants, not just mentioned as mere tokens as part of this.
Is Captain McKenna still here? Okay, because I just wanted to recognize and say thank you. We actually have a government who's listening to us, so I just wanted to give an applause to them. We pretty much achieved consensus on 11 points. Science needs to drive policy change. No more subsidies for fuel. 100% renewables by 2050. No more pipelines. Indigenous rights have to be respected. That means veto power on pipelines. Stop subsidies for oils and gas. Carbon tax, not carbon-free. Finances. We need a national reporting system on carbon reduction by industry sector with measurable targets and transparent reporting. And we need justice for all. We need to recognize we're not just Canadians. We have a historical responsibility as emissions polluters. We created this problem. It's the developing world that's suffering the most. We have to recognize that. We have to lead by example.
Hi, so I first heard about climate change as a child, and one of the first experiences that I had was hearing my parents tell me about how beautiful the coral reefs are, and I wanted to go swim with them, and I was so scared and sad when I realized I wasn't going to be able to because of climate change. And you know what, even as a child, that was when I realized that we need to stop burning greenhouse gases, and the only way to do that is to keep fossil fuels in the ground. How are we going to get there? We need to start building a 100% renewable energy economy. We need to get there by 2050, and the only way to do that is to start now. We need to start yesterday, but we can start now. And you know, another thing I learned since I was a kid is that it's not just the coral reefs at stake. It's also people. People's livelihoods and lives are on the line. People of small island states in the global south, and also right here at home, Indigenous communities. I had the opportunity to go to Amjanon First Nation last summer. That's in Sarnia, Ontario. 40% of Canada's petrochemical refineries are located there. I talked to women my age who are leading the fight in their communities. I talked to mothers who saw their children sent home from school because they're getting sick. Fathers who told me how they're seeing cancer rates going up. So you know what? Those people, even though they're being suffocated, they're actually leaving. And we need to listen and we need to act. And like many other groups, we're seeing contradictions as well. It's great to have the rhetoric, but you need to have the actions too. So we need to enshrine justice for Indigenous communities, keep fossil fuels in the ground, and build that renewable energy economy by 2050.
All right, our group had a ton of ideas. I'll try to get to them all. future is don't suppress the economy of the future by building pipelines and allowing fracking, which are attracting investment away from things that we need more of rather than we have enough of already. Consider what high-risk investment means. New bitumen and oil investment is high risk. It's the most Canadian-specific, unique problem. We need to be seen to be addressing it. Exporting oil is not a solution, putting it on other countries' books. We need to properly account for cleanup of oil and gas sites, fund jobs in cleanup, not in extraction. Target R&D in green technology, subsidize renewable energy. Exploration subsidies for exploring for new oil and gas, ridiculously unneeded to get rid of them. Keep it in the ground. Carbon tax now, you're the majority to do it. Biochar, you need to incent burying carbon. There needs to be a price on carbon so that you can be incented to bury it away, to sequester it with wood fuel rather than anything very complicated. Indigenous communities need proper informed consent. You've heard it. The same agreed development on their territories. Please reinstate Navigable Waters Act. Policies of rail transport needs to be encouraged. Must promote electric transport, such as through charging stations. Things like the Union Pearson Express being non-electrified are a waste. All new rail investment should be electric or otherwise carbon neutral. Community-level projects to build consensus and support rather than division. Account for and control shipping emissions, air travel, and military exemptions, and if possible. Safe trucks. Transport Canada regulates safe trucks, side guards, pedestrian cyclist protection. Transport Canada must regulate it. And finally, Canada can regulate standards for fuel economy, appliances, and building code. More efficient buildings mean more jobs in carpentry and air sealing and high efficiency insulation. Good jobs, less fossil fuel. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, great. So our group echoes many of the issues brought up by other groups. Obviously, keep fossil fuels in the ground. Do not expand the fossil fuel industry in any way, shape, or form, and put an end to the current projects that are going forward. Building lines to export fossil fuels displaces the issue and puts onerous on other countries. We need to take it for ourselves. There needs to be training for green jobs. Current energy sector needs to be given training at first dibs on jobs in the clean energy sector. This will help to mitigate any outcries that those folks will have by losing their jobs into the future. And the government needs to explicitly demonstrate their commitment to ensuring these people will have jobs despite reducing the production of oil. The Public Bank of Canada should be funding infrastructure, keeping services publicized, none of this neoliberal crap of neoliberal crap, and respecting UNDRIP to the fullest extent. Thanks.
6 key points. Leave fossil fuels in the ground. That means no more pipelines. Secondly, to emphasize food security, sustainable food production, to involve the First Nations front and center, to have climate change education in our schools. We're going to need public ownership of energy, and as well as public banking and public ownership of transportation. 6th, community-based solutions that emphasize renewables. 7th, to work with other countries in order to implement the UN's Sustainable Development Goals. And 8th, to be concerned about labor market adjustment, helping workers with the transition to renewables. Thank you.
Greg, can you hold your hand up so I can see where you are?
Greg had to go.
Okay. It's pretty now. Okay, thank you.
Hi, so thank you all for being here. It's really encouraging. We view climate change as an existential threat that has to take priority over commercial interests. We want to acknowledge that human-caused climate change has started the 6th extinction of our species that we've experienced in the world. Anybody who wants to know anything about that, read The 6th Extinction, the Pulitzer Prize-winning book that came out last year. That will scare the hell out of you. But it's really important because we believe that part of leadership isn't, some people think, leading from behind, but it's helping people understand what's true in the world so that we can motivate people to support the political action necessary to protect all of us. We don't support the building of pipelines that will contribute to fossil fuel emissions. We believe the government should stop subsidizing oil companies and make the leaders pay for the environmental damage they cause. We want to redirect those funds to support the progress in our renewable energy industry, but also to transition oil industry workers to sustainable jobs that will serve their families well for the long term. That money has to be used for good, not evil and good.
Thank you. Before we go to the next person, can I see a show of hands? We should have about, I think, 7 groups left by the counts of how we had organized before. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Perfect. Okay, so at least we can spot everyone where we're going. All right, let's start.
Hi. It's too bad Ms. McKenna is not here because the skepticism with liberal ideology in this room is quite palpable, and I think she needs to take that message back to Prime Minister Trudeau. A lot of our groups and points were covered. There's a scientific report that came out from a man named David Hughes this week. He's a respected scientist, federal scientist. And he basically said, in terms of Canada's position, we can't have our cake and eat it too. Meaning, we can't have a policy to